1974. A small theater. Dylan was singing. And then he stopped. The venue was the Orpheum Theater in Boston. Not the Grand Orpheum. The small one. The forgotten one. Capacity maybe 400. Half full that night. November rain outside. Wooden seats that creaked. Exposed brick walls that had seen better decades. A single spotlight that buzzed. Bob Dylan stood on the small stage with his acoustic guitar. He was 3 songs into a set that wasn't advertised. No posters. No radio announcement. Just word of mouth that Dylan might show up at this small theater to work through some new material before the real tour started. The people who came weren't the screaming fans from the 60s. They were quiet. Older. They sat in wooden chairs and listened like they were in church. Dylan played. Tangled Up in Blue. His voice rough. Weathered. The voice of someone who'd been called the voice of a generation and had spent a decade trying to escape that title. 3rd verse. 2nd line. His hands stopped moving on the strings. The chord hung in the air, incomplete. Then silence. Dylan's head turned slowly toward the back of the theater. His eyes found someone in the darkness of the back row. An old man. Sitting alone. Hands folded in his lap. White hair catching the dim light. Dylan's mouth opened slightly. Not to sing. Just to breathe. The audience waited. They'd learned over the years that Dylan's silences meant something. You didn't fill them. You didn't clap. You waited. Dylan didn't explain himself. He never did. The old man in the back didn't move. He sat perfectly still, looking at the stage with an expression that held 40 years of something Dylan recognized immediately. Dylan lowered his guitar slowly. Let it hang from the shoulder strap. He stepped away from the microphone. Walked to the edge of the small stage. Sat down on the edge, legs dangling, and just looked at the man in the back. Nobody knew what was happening. The house lights were too dim to see the old man clearly from the middle rows. But everyone could see Dylan. See the way his shoulders had changed. The performer mask gone. Just a man sitting on a stage looking at someone he knew. Time stretched. Maybe 30 seconds. Maybe a minute. In a concert, that's an eternity. Then Dylan spoke. Not into the microphone. Just into the room. Quiet. The theater was small enough that his voice carried. How long has it been, Henry? The old man's voice came from the darkness. Thin. Tired. But clear. 1958, Bobby. Bobby. Not Bob. Not Dylan. Bobby Zimmerman. The name from before. The audience sat frozen. Witnesses to something they didn't understand but knew was important. Dylan nodded slowly. You're still here. Still here, the old man confirmed. I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't. Dylan looked down at his hands. The hands that had played guitar for presidents and protesters. The hands that had written songs that changed music. He looked at them like they belonged to someone else. I owe you an apology, Dylan said to the darkness where Henry sat. 16 years too late. But I owe you one. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1958. Bob Dylan wasn't Bob Dylan yet. He was Bobby Zimmerman, 17 years old, living in Hibbing, Minnesota. Small town. Iron Range. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone and nothing ever changed. Bobby played guitar. Taught himself. Spent hours in his room working through Woody Guthrie's songs and blues records his older cousin sent him from Chicago. He was good. Not great yet. But good enough that people noticed. Henry Morrison taught English at Hibbing High School. He was 53 years old. Unmarried. Lived alone in a small house 3 blocks from the school. He loved poetry. Loved music. Loved teaching kids who actually wanted to learn. Bobby Zimmerman was one of those kids. Not in class. Bobby was a mediocre student at best. But Henry had started an after-school music appreciation club. Just a handful of kids who wanted to talk about Leadbelly and Hank Williams, and what made a song work beyond the notes. Bobby came every Tuesday. Brought his guitar. Played for the group. Henry would sit in his worn armchair and listen with his eyes closed, the way serious listeners do. "You're going to be something, Bobby," Henry told him once. "I don't know what. But something." Bobby was 17 and didn't believe him. But he kept coming to those Tuesday sessions. Henry's house became a refuge. A place where Bobby could play music that his parents didn't understand and talk about leaving Hibbing someday and becoming a real musician. "When you make it," Henry said, "and you will make it, remember something from me." "What's that?" "Remember that music isn't about being heard. It's about listening. Really listening. To the people who need what you're saying." Bobby graduated in 1959. He left Hibbing that summer. Headed to Minneapolis. Then New York. He changed his name. Changed his sound. Became Bob Dylan. Became the voice of a generation whether he wanted to be or not. He never went back to Hibbing. Never looked back. And he never thanked Henry Morrison. Never wrote. Never called. Just disappeared into fame and left the people from before in the rearview mirror. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. Henry Morrison retired from teaching in 1970. He'd spent 30 years in that classroom, teaching English to kids who mostly didn't care. But every few years, there was a Bobby Zimmerman. A kid who actually listened. Who took something with them. Henry had followed Bobby's career from a distance. Bought the records when they came out. Read the reviews. Watched him on television when Dylan did the rare TV appearance. He never told anyone that he'd known Bob Dylan. Never used it to make himself important. That wasn't the point. But he wondered sometimes if Bobby remembered those Tuesday afternoons. If any of it had mattered. In 1974, Henry was 69 years old. His health was failing. Heart problems. The doctors had given him maybe a year. Maybe less. He'd sold his house in Hibbing and moved to Boston to be near his sister in his final months. He didn't plan to go to the Orpheum that night. He'd seen in a local paper that Dylan might appear, just a small mention, easy to miss. Henry had thought about it for 3 days. Then decided. He bought a ticket. Took a taxi. Sat in the back row where he could leave easily if he needed to. He didn't expect Dylan to see him. Didn't expect Dylan to remember. He just wanted to hear the music one more time. Wanted to see what Bobby Zimmerman had become. And then Dylan stopped playing. Looked right at him. Said his name. The theater was still silent. Dylan still sitting on the stage edge. Henry still in the back row. "I should have written," Dylan said quietly. "I should have said thank you. For those Tuesdays. For listening when nobody else did." Henry's voice wavered. "You got busy. I understand. That's not an excuse." Dylan shook his head. "You taught me something I forgot. Somewhere between the songs and the crowds and the noise, I forgot." "Forgot what?" "That music isn't about being heard. It's about listening." Henry was crying now. Silent tears running down his weathered face. Dylan saw them even from the stage. Dylan stood up. Picked up his guitar. Put the strap back over his shoulder. He walked back to the microphone but didn't sing. He just stood there, looking at the old man in the back. "This next song," Dylan said into the microphone, his voice rough with emotion, "isn't finished yet. I've been working on it for a year. Can't get the ending right. But I think maybe I know now what it's supposed to be about." He started playing. Slow. Just guitar. No harmonica. No band. Just Dylan and 6 strings in a small theater holding its breath. The song was about teachers. About the people who see something in you before you see it yourself. About forgetting where you came from. About time running out to say thank you. It wasn't pretty. Some of the lines didn't skin right. The melody wandered. But it was real. Raw. The most honest thing Dylan had played in years. When he finished, the audience didn't applaud. They just sat there. Processing. Understanding they'd witnessed something that wasn't a performance. It was a conversation. A confession. A bridge built across 16 years of silence. Dylan set his guitar down gently. Stepped off the stage. Walked up the center aisle. The audience parted as he passed. Some of them were crying. They didn't know why exactly, but they felt it. The weight of what was happening. Dylan reached the back row. Henry stood up slowly, unsteady on his feet. They looked at each other. Two men separated by fame and time but connected by Tuesday afternoons in a small Minnesota town. Dylan extended his hand. Henry took it. Then Dylan pulled him into an embrace. The kind you give someone when you know time is short. They stayed like that for a long moment. The small theater silent. 400 strangers bearing witness to something private and profound. When they separated, Dylan said something only Henry could hear. Whatever it was made Henry nod. Made him smile through his tears. Dylan helped Henry sit back down. Then he turned to the audience. "I'm going to take a break," he said. "When I come back, we're going to try that song again. And this time, I think I'll get the ending right." Away from the spotlight, Dylan made a choice no one expected. During the break, Dylan took Henry backstage. They sat in the small dressing room that smelled like dust and old wood. Drank coffee from styrofoam cups. Talked about Hibbing. About those Tuesday afternoons. About what had happened in the years between. "I have maybe 6 months," Henry told him. "Maybe less. I'm not afraid. But I am glad I came tonight." Dylan nodded. "Me too." "The song," Henry said. "The one you just played. It's good. But you're right. The ending isn't there yet. What should it be?" Henry thought for a moment. "Not resolution. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. That we saw each other. That it mattered. That's enough." Dylan wrote that down in a small notebook he always carried. Just 3 words, "We saw each other." When the break ended, Dylan went back on stage. Henry stayed backstage, sitting in a folding chair, listening from the wings. Dylan played the song again. Changed the last verse. Used Henry's words. Made it simpler. Truer. The audience didn't know what had changed. But they felt it. The song now had an ending that made sense. After the show, Dylan gave Henry something. A guitar pick. Worn smooth from years of use. The pick he'd used on his first album. "I should have given you this a long time ago," Dylan said. "For teaching me to listen." Henry closed his hand around it. Held it like it was precious. Which it was. They said goodbye in the rain outside the theater. Henry got in his taxi. Dylan watched it disappear into the November night. Henry Morrison died 4 months later. February 1975. His sister called Dylan's management company. Left a message. Dylan was on tour. He got the news 2 days after the funeral. He canceled a show for the first time in 5 years. Flew to Boston. Visited Henry's grave alone. Left the guitar pick on the headstone. The song Dylan wrote that night was never officially released. But bootleg recordings exist. People who were there that night still talk about it. They call it the teacher's song. Dylan performed it only once more. At a small benefit concert in 1989. When asked about it afterward, he said nothing. Just walked off stage the way he always did. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. In Dylan's studio in Malibu, there's a photograph pinned to the wall. Faded. From 1958. Bobby Zimmerman at 17, holding a guitar, sitting in Henry Morrison's living room on a Tuesday afternoon. Dylan put it there in 1975. It's never been moved. The song's final lyric, the one Henry suggested, became the title. We saw each other. 3 words. That's all. But for Dylan, It was everything he'd forgotten and everything he remembered just in time.